Reflecting on the theme of our meeting today, I wondered whether democracy can really be considered a shared value. Many in the West think that democracy is a value of the West, and that, therefore, it is a flag that we can wave as opposed to another part of the world. Some would like to see this distinction, democracy versus autocracy, become the new Berlin Wall of the new Cold War, of a new bipolarity and opposition that will make all international cooperation difficult. We, Westerners, are proud of the democracy we have won in our countries, particularly in Europe. This was the fruit of a long historical process that began with the French Revolution. And whose main protagonist was the workers' movement aimed at winning effective popular sovereignty against the narrow oligarchies that had long dominated our societies. Particularly in my country, Italy, in the last century, democracy was won through the struggle against fascism and Nazism, with the high price of sacrifice paid by our parents during the World War II. But this legitimate pride should not prevent us from seeing that our model, precisely because it is the result of a long and peculiar historical process, cannot be exported and imposed in other parts of the world, as the experiences made in Afghanistan or Iraq or in the Middle East have shown again in the recent years. Secondly, it is also evident that today's world cannot be reduced to a contrast between two models, being instead rich in different experiences that cannot be traced back to the ideological opposition that characterized the past century. Those who believe, as I do, in the values of democracy should also know that the logic of the Cold War and ideological challenge is not conducive to the circulation of ideas and dialogue in which different civilization cultures influence one another. On the contrary, it ends up resulting in a rigidity that is certainly not conducive to the affirmation of human rights and democratic principles. Rather, the problem seems to me to be one of deeper reflection on the reason why that process that seemed unstoppable after 1989 of expansion of the liberal democratic model has come to an halt today, and our model of Western democracy has lost credibility and attractiveness. I do not believe that this depends fundamentally on the aggressiveness of the so-called autocracies, but on the contrary, on phenomena within our own societies that have progressively eroded the consensus basis of democratic compromise. At the origin of this is a globalization without rules based on the domination of financial capitalism and the market that has ended up subduing the power of nation states, producing enormous social inequalities, no longer compensated by fiscal, welfare policies, redistribution of wealth. As politics, which remain confined to a national dimension, is suffocated by the power of global capitalism. The motivations for democratic participation are reduced, as it's happening in so much of the Western country, and phenomena of populism and irrationality spread, leading to political instability and the decay of the ruling classes. Democracy thus proves to be more than a model to be exported, a value to be rebuilt in our own societies through public policies capable of re-establishing a primacy of politics over economics and imposing effective remedies to inequality and social injustice and limitation to overpowering power of money, which all the more so through the control of modern media appears increasingly capable of manipulating and conditioning political opinions themselves. The risk is, as Joe Stiglitz wrote a few years ago, of moving from the glorious season in which the democratic principle was one head, one vote, to the new principle of $1, one vote. Democracy thus presents itself as a great challenge by demonstrating that popular sovereignty is not a conquest valid forever, but a goal to be constantly reasserted against old and new enemies. It is true for the Western world. It is certainly not less true for other worlds with which we are confronted today. The avenues for the realization of citizen sovereignty may certainly be different, but the onus is on those who pursue an alternative model to the West to show in practice the compatibility between the absence of political pluralism and the effective exercise of freedom of criticism, dissent, and control over political power. The absence of open and critical public confrontation, the impossibility of ruling class turnover are factors that can lead to crystallization and decay of any political regime. Historical experience shows that the vitality and the ability of human society to progress also depend on the degree of individual and collective freedom that is granted to citizens. The tradition of modern thought, there has been a confrontation between the Marxist and liberal views. Marxism has emphasized liberation from need, while liberalism has focused rather on individual rights. Now it seems clear to me that without the liberation of the great mass of citizens from material needs, the actual enjoyment of individual rights of freedom is granted only to a small minority. But it is also true that the right to work, to food, to health, to housing cannot replace freedom of thought, of expression, of religious faith. Instead, it is true that the higher the degree of social emancipation, the more needs for individual freedom are generated. On the great issue of human freedom and how it can be granted, it will be time for an open dialogue between cultures and civilization, and not ideological and propagandistic opposition, not least because we face great common challenges. Just think on the relationship between technological innovation in the world of artificial intelligence and big data and the human condition. Innovation brings about enormous possibility for increasing the quality of life, but also the risk of new forms of control and domination. We have to correct the drift toward a return to a world of opposing ideological and military blocs. It is important to deepen dialogue, to search for shared values, and at the same time to give greater strength to the common institutions, international institutions necessary to govern a multipolar world. This is the real international dimension of democracy. No comeback to bipolarity, no accept a unipolar world, but to govern together a multipolar reality. Thank you.